a rich guy pulls up to the nightclub he owns. The valet comes up and he says, "Good evening, Mr. Hugo." And he's like, "It's always a good evening when you're rich."
Did you really say that?
Yeah.
Nice.
This guy's an asshole.
Okay.
And he has a giant white fur coat and a white suit. And his name is Frankie Hugo.
Frankie Hugo.
And he's like, "Check out my monogram on my jacket. It says F you." He was the original Frank Underwood.
Oh, okay. Exactly.
And he owns the place, and he like hits on a woman. Mm-hmm. And the second she says "get lost," he looks at the bartender and goes, "Kick her out. Get rid of her." He's hitting on the waitresses. He also makes eyes at our main attraction on stage, Dolly Parton.
Dolly Parton.
Dolly Parton. If you don't remember Dolly Parton in the 80s, maybe the most talented person you've ever seen.
Okay.
Like she just oozes charisma, and she writes those songs.
Yeah.
Did you know she writes those songs?
Oh, Miss Dolly.
So all of the songs are great. She's doing a number.
Wait, is this 9 to 5?
No,
okay.
9 to 5 is a great song.
Okay.
9 to 5 is a really... 9 to 5 might be my favorite song. Yeah. So Dolly Parton...
What a way to make a living.
Dolly Parton's up there. Not only is Dolly Parton one of the most talented singer-songwriters of all time, her body has the proportions of a teenage boy doing a sexist drawing. So you just have to accept that for the rest of the movie.
Because it's this stick figure with big old titties.
It's the waist to bust ratio. Holy smokes.
Yeah.
So she's on stage, and then she gets off stage. Of course, old Frankie Hugo is hitting on her. Old FU is hitting on her big time. She's handling it with the grace and poise we expect from Dolly. Mm-hmm. And then FU is telling his buddy how his whole thing is he wants to discover the next big thing. Mm-hmm. And he's like, "I got a guy coming in here tonight. He's going to be the next big thing." Mm-hmm. Because, after Dolly gets off stage, he says, "Next we got amateur night." Everyone's like, "We're going to kill him." The audience comes to amateur night to heckle and ruin dreams. But Frankie just wants the next big thing. That's his dream. And then at some point, Dolly Parton's like, "I could be the next big thing, but you won't let me out of my contract that I signed when I was young and impressionable." And he's like, "Well, sleep with me and you can get out of it." And she's like, "F you, F you."
F you, F you.
And she's like, "No, thank you." So then this is really funny. So the guy that comes in, also, then we see Japanese. This is very 80s. The Japanese tourists. Japanese tourists are in New York City. Yeah. And then a cab pulls up driving like a maniac. Who's the cab driver? Sylvester Stallone.
Hell yes!
It's Stallone. So Sylvester Stallone is a horrible driver. Like, he's a crazy driver. These poor Japanese people get in his car, and he's doing U-turns. He's like hitting stuff.
Okay.
And they're like, "We want to go to a sushi restaurant," this Japanese family. And he's like, "Hey, no offense, but that's raw fish." He's telling them their culture is incorrect. And then he says something funny. He goes, "Hey, you're an American now. We eat Italian food." And then it's amateur night. And the owner, FU, he's like, "This next guy is going to be the next big thing." And this guy comes out, and he's got like a black hat, I think. And he's got a big scar on his face. And he's got a whole black outfit. And at first they're heckling him, but then he takes the mic stand and bends it in half. Okay. And they're like, "Oh, this guy's a maniac." Yeah. And he starts singing, and sounds exactly like Johnny Cash. Okay. And he's like, "I was a boy, and I had a scar in my soul to match the one on my eye." Oh. And he's like, "And that was the night. I never forget the night that my baby died." Oh, God. It's like dark, poetic Johnny Cash music. And at first they're like, "Oh, this guy's good." And Frank Underwood, Frankie Hugo is going like, "See, he's going to be a hit." But then he starts telling the story, and it just keeps getting weirder. And he's like, "We got married that day." He goes, "And I begged her not to wear her wedding dress and get on the plow."
Get on the plow?
He goes, "She was still wearing her wedding dress and holding the bouquet, and I begged her not to plow the crops that day." He goes, and she had a beauty that never stops, but she felt a duty to the crops." And then we actually see people in the audience go, "A duty to the crops?" Like, they don't get it either. They're like, "This is getting a little too weird." Yeah. And then he's like, "Then the John Deere grabbed her dress and pulled her under."
Oh, no.
And then people are like, "What the fuck? He's like, I'll never forget when I saw that day. There was blood on the corn and brains on the hay.
Oh, boy.
There was chunks of my Loretta all over the place.
Oh.
And I was in my hair for weeks. There's chunks of Loretta that day, but it's like big globs of my baby all over my face.
Oh,
and everyone's like, they start laughing because it's so ridiculous.
Yeah.
They start laughing at him like, chunks of Loretta, ha ha ha. And they catch the guy and he goes, you guys, this really happened. And they go, ha ha, your wife is dead. And they laugh Johnny Cash and his scar on his face out of the room.
Oh, no.
And Frank Hugo is like, well, God damn it. He goes, you get the feeling this happens every week.
Yeah.
And then Dolly Parton's like, hey, sorry about that. And he's like, yeah, I just want to break the next star. And she's like, you know what? I think, how hard could it be? I bet you I could do it. And he's like, you think you could create the next star? And he's like, yeah, I'll create the next star out of a nobody. Is this the plot to like My Fair Lady and Pygmalion?
Is this Trading Places?
I feel like this is kind of Trading Places. It's kind of a lot of movies.
Yeah.
Where he's like, you give me any Joe off the street and I can make him a country star. But if I do it, you have to release me from my contract.
Okay.
And he says, okay. And if you can't do it, I get to fuck you.
Okay.
So then we go to the streets of New York, which we all know has full of crazy homeless guys.
Yep.
And he's like, what about him? And she's like, come on. And he's like, well, that crazy homeless guy's dancing on the street, but he is holding drumsticks.
Okay.
So that's,
So he's got
that's
a
musical.
gift. Yeah.
And then who should pull up but old Sly Stallone with a backseat full of a nice Japanese family who he's been torturing with his bad driving and by judging their food taste.
Yeah, hungry Japanese people.
Hungry, tortured Japanese people. And they're like, that guy. Oh, and since we've seen his cab in the last scene, it's got banged up. Like, he's that bad at driving. He's gotten in 5 accidents with this Japanese couple in the back. So they're like, that guy. So then they bring Stallone to talk to him about it. And Stallone's like, hey, you want to sleep with me, Dolly Parton? And she's like, no, thank you.
Yeah.
And then he's like, well, then I'm going to leave. And then Dolly Parton, she really wants to get out of her contract. So she goes to the taxi cab place. And she's like, hey, was there a taxi cab that got in a bunch of accidents last night? And he's like, no. And they would have reported it. So you must have the wrong place. And then Stallone pulls in with his taxi cab all busted up. And he's like, God damn it, Stallone. You're paying for that. And he's like, I can't pay for it. And then so he gets fired. And then Dolly Parton's like, look, this bet you rejected, this guy's really rich. If you reconsider the bet, he'll pay for your taxi, and then you can start working here again, because they wanted him to pay for the damage. And he's like, okay, fine, I'll do it. So then they go to where Frank Hugo lives, and it's in Trump Tower.
Oh.
He agrees, so he's like, okay, I'll pay for the repairs. And then Stallone's like, actually, that's not what I want. If I win this, I want you to buy me my own cab, so I can be my own boss. The rich guy goes, have you ever sung in public before? And he goes, like, never. And he's like, do you even like country music? He's like, I hate it. And he's like, okay, fine.
All right.
I'll agree to it. So then there's a scene with his very Italian family being Italian, and they're just like, he's a loser. He can't do nothing. The mom's like, you don't understand. He can't become a country music star. His brain, it's full. He hasn't put anything new in there since he was 8. And then they're going back to Tennessee. That's where she's from. So they pull into Tennessee, and there's a bunch of sheep everywhere. And her dad, I guess her name is Jake for some reason.
Oh, that's...
Because he's got a sign that says, welcome home, Jake. And he's just nice old guy. And he's like, welcome home, honey. So then they're in the country. They go back to the old farm her dad lives on. And she's like, what's new, Dad? And he's like, well, old farmer Pete down the road got a new pig. He's got some real nice testicles on him.
What?
He's like, you want to go see those after dinner? You want to go look at those, Nick? His name's Nick. You want to go look at those after dinner, Nick? And Nick's like, I'm okay.
He doesn't want to.
I don't get this.
I thought that'd be his thing. I didn't know pigs had nuts.
Oh, dude. Dude.
The look on your face was insane.
I just remembered I've seen them. Pigs are mostly bald. People don't know that. Basically, pigs are the Dolly Parton of balls. The past was doing its best.
That's the theme song.
Leave them alone. Leave them alone. Leave them alone. They were doing their best.